All right, welcome everybody to the 20th, yes, the 20th episode of the Veilcast. We have now done this 20 freaking times. It is 7 months. We've been doing this for 7 months, and I want to thank all of you and thank Chris for showing up. I'm not thanking this because he's not here right now because he's off doing some family thing, casual non-gamer activities. But I want to thank all of you for coming out and watching these episodes and making them part of your regular thing, hopefully, and enjoying them and participating to help us, do all this stuff and talk about the episodes. Our videos on YouTube have been getting, I think, 2,000-3,000 views a piece and everything, which really helps us feel motivated to keep doing this. It also helps that we're getting info on classes now, and classes is what we're going to be talking about. Today, we are talking about the... what's it called? The Heavy Fighters. I was like, Heavy Assault. That's not what it's called.
No.
Talking about the Heavy Fighters. And by Heavy Fighters, I do not mean aircraft. I mean tanks, because they're not going to be aircraft in the game. Tanks, and not the rolling armored kind.
They might go flying eventually.
What we're really going to be talking about are the Stalwarts, because I like that name better than Heavy Fighters. But anyway, saw somebody use that, and I'm running with it. But, Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's my day off for once. I'm off on the Saturday, so that's great.
It is good. Don't you usually have to run to work right after this ends?
Right after the cast, yeah, pretty much. I just change and run to work.
Yeah, it's the opposite for me today. I just got off of work and got in here and set this up. So,
nice.
I guess I wanted to start off with just general impression, because we are looking at the Heavy Fighters. These are essentially the tanks, the toughest of the characters that are going to be in this first set of 10 archetypes. And so, Chris, how do you feel, coming out of the live stream, how do you feel about the Heavy Fighters?
I feel good because tanks are always a worry in PvP, because the concept of tank itself is not really fitting for PvP as we know it. They're more of a PvE role with the taunts and the damage mitigation. They're usually pretty useless, basically, in PvP. So the way they're treating it, I think it's a pretty good way of seeing it and of changing the current way of seeing tanks and their usefulness in PvP.
Yeah, I'm very excited by some of the parts of the tanks. I do think. Well, I noticed, after the live stream, they always ask us for the thumbs up or thumbs down for the cast. Nobody's like thumbs down. However, I did notice there was a slight lack of the degree of enthusiasm there were for the previous casts.
Especially for the Archer.
Like the Archer and the Val, they got everybody was just like, yeah. This one they were like, yeah. There was a little bit of in there. Not as many people yelling out their thumbs up for that. Yeah. Why do you think there might have been a little bit of hesitance?
I think it's because of the lack of info we have on melee, the melee system. So far, we've seen a lot of cool range classes, range mechanics, magic, the air system, which archers will be part of. So it's a lot of cool things to see, but they haven't talked much about melee. So right now it's pretty much a known quantity. So with the range being so awesome, we've seen it in the questions also during the Q&A. I think people are worried about melee being underpowered and the lack of gap closers for melee fighters.
Yeah, I mean, I've even said it a couple times in the Veilcast that I was kind of worried. Not that I haven't been worried that the melee are going to be underpowered. I've been more worried that with all the really cool stuff some of the other classes get, how can the tanks and the other melee people be
They-
as cool?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've like, you know, the mages got all these spells. They have the whole air system that they really play into, and the archers get some cool effects, and they even play into the air system a little bit. And they get camouflage, and then we come to the warriors, and there was a little bit of hesitation there. I think a part of it is one. I mean, when they do the live streams, they don't go through the details of all the abilities. So afterwards, everyone goes to the pages and looks through the abilities, and they go, "Oh, okay, they can do that, and they can do that. Okay, that's pretty cool." And there is some of that, but even still, there's not like anything that particularly stands out, except maybe for the Mjolnir, which gets like lightning and stuff, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think a part of it, at least if in my opinion, is every game has tanks. Yep. What else can you do with tanks? Every game has tanks. Just about every type of tank has been done. So I was kind of expecting it to a certain degree, because it's like, what else can they do to make tanks just crazy awesome without it being like, oh, that's been done. You know, Simpsons did it.
Yeah.
That's been done, and that's been done, and that's been done. It's been done. It's a tank. That's what a tank is. I was excited
and
that they're going.
Useless also.
Yeah, I was excited that they're going like the PvP route and giving them a little bit more damage, making them more mobile, so that they're useful in PvP. I think it's also, you know, something we have to keep in mind is the collision system with air and everything. I mean,
that's going to be the huge part, and the huge bonus for them, the collision and the mass for the tanks. I think the critical mechanic that are going to make them really impacting during combat, it's going to be the physics, but more importantly, the mass system, with the size, the fact that they're really, really heavy players, really heavy characters that can push you around and interrupt casters. The critical thing will be what gap closers they have, how fast they can get into melee range without having too much damage and still being combat ready.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what they do. Is in every game they block damage. I think that's where part of the underwhelming part of it came in, because people were waiting to hear, oh, how are they going to have these abilities that do this cool tanky stuff? But it's like, they don't need taunts. They can stand in front of the attack. They don't need a magical guard that protects someone else necessarily, because they can just go stand in front of the fireball. That's how the game works. So it's kind of already built into the system. Now, they're still going to have some of that stuff that they can do. But I think that might have been a source of some of the issues, because there are some of these things we already know about the game that they're going to be able to do just by default. And the other classes don't really have that necessarily. I was also really excited when they mentioned that they really do want to get wall climbing in with ladders or siege towers or something, however they got to do it, because I think that will hugely help the fighters in being bored during sieges. Yeah.
Especially the melee. Because the moment you actually get on the walls and inside the keeps, that's the melee's world. Because you don't have as much range as outside, so they can more easily get into melee. And I think the heavy fighters are going to be the assault teams. They're going to be the SWATs of CU, jumping in the castles and taking points and wreaking havoc inside. I'd love to see, when I saw the Black Knights artwork, the first idea that popped in my head was the Roman turtle formation, with those huge shields, just a turtle formation in the middle of a keep, keeping everybody at bay and busy while the others just wreak havoc.
Yeah, and they kind of mentioned a little bit of that, say, when someone asked them what role they're going to have during sieges when everything is long range. And yeah, there's going to be a lull. If everyone's at super long range firing in, that's going to be a problem. Yeah. But if they can scale walls, then they can move in as a group, get to the walls, scale them. Also, they mentioned having crafters have set down traps in like the gate of the keep or something, and they may just, literally walk in and just face plant into the trap, knowingly going, I'm a tank, I can take it, and they walk in and it hits them, and then they just go, meh.
Man, just a flesh wound.
Yeah, that's only on the Arthurian side.
Yes, of course.
Speaking of which, I guess, Unless I missed anything. Oh, I did have one more thing I want to mention before we go into the specializations for each of the classes. Another thing I was excited about with these, with all warriors in general, I guess, manual blocking.
That will be probably one of the most interesting mechanics. That will make fights interesting.
Yeah, I think it's going to do a lot for the warriors as well, and I think that's something else that was probably underestimated by some people when they mention it, is how engaging that's going to be. Because usually in most MMOs, you walk around, you have a shield, it just adds to your armor bonus, and you just walk around going, I've got a shield. But in this game, you'll be making abilities based on your shield to block stuff. Someone's going to shoot a fireball, and you're like, oh, I have a shield ability that's going to block that. And you hit it, you stand in front of it, you block it, and then you keep walking towards the keep. Or maybe they shoot something at your head, and you have a shield ability that blocks your face.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty cool.
I think you see on the artwork a huge shield, the Knight Shield. But I think you're going to have to need also different shields because of the crafting system and of the crafting properties.
Yeah.
So if you're mostly fighting magic users, you're going to have a different shield and things like that. So it's going to be also very interesting to see how fights go like that. Because if you have magic users throwing fireballs at you and your shield has a very, very high melting point, so you can take all the fireballs while moving towards them. I think that's going to be a cool factor.
Yeah, I think
you can see it's, the monster arriving and everybody backing off, still throwing fireballs and seeing that it has no effect. So I think that's going to be cool.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that for covering some of the distance and range as well, how awesome and useful shields are going to be in that. If you're going out there without a shield, you got a two-hander or two one-handed weapons, you're going to be more vulnerable. You got the shield, especially if you have an active blocking ability. It sounds to me anyway like, if you're getting 3 guys all blasting at you, you're probably pretty screwed. But if it's just like one-on-one or 2 guys shooting at you, you can dodge some stuff, you can block some things, and you'll probably be able to advance towards the wall without losing all your health in the process. And of course, we know there are going to be engravings and enchants, as James Goblin just mentioned, so that we can hopefully maybe you can have armor that soaks normal damage. Maybe your shield can have enchantments on it to soak magic. And then you can see the fireball and whatnot. And they also mentioned that some of the tanks will have abilities to reduce the effectiveness of crowd control.
Yes.
Which I think will be really important, because I know a lot of people have been worried about just being rooted in
stun
place.
Log, the roots, stuns, slows, everything. Yeah.
A stop tank is a pointless tank.
Yes, exactly. I think they will have also a lot of different type of charges as gap closers.
Yeah, we can see some already on the page.
Either a shield charge, or if you have a two-hander, like a berserk charge, reducing damage while you're doing the charge, things like that.
Yeah, and since I mentioned that, we do have some of those on the page of the different classes. So let's just go ahead and talk about them. For the Tuatha, we've got the Fianna class. We've got the Mjolnir for the Vikings, which is essentially Thor, for all intents and purposes. And we've got the Black Knight, 'tis but a flesh wound, for the Arthurians. Not actually stylized off Monty Python. But that's going to result in 5 million "'tis but a flesh wound" jokes post-launch.
Yes, of course.
So brace yourself for them now. They're coming. So let's start with the Tuatha, because we never start with the Tuatha, so why not? And
the tree humpers.
Yeah. The Fianna. I noticed, looking at their class page, one of their big things seems to be their war shout. Which seems to be like an AoE buff for themselves and all their allies. Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, pretty cool. I think that's going to really help them with not necessarily grouping with people of the same class, but diversifying and getting in groups with lots of different other Tuatha classes. What do you think about the Tuatha, the Fianna approach with all their buffs and everything?
They're actually pretty cool. They're more of that's also why it's great for those trios with the non-mirror classes. The Fianna looks more from the abilities we can see like a buffer, damage link buffer, more than they're tanks. Yes, they're heavy armors with the shield, but they're also very proficient in buffing everybody around them. So they're more like the platoon leaders, the support. So I think it's a pretty nice twist to just being a tank soaking damage. You can still be the attention getter by actually buffing everybody, because they know that if they get you, that's all those buffs going off the buff bar of all your group. So it still gets you the attention of the enemy, but in a different way than just blocking damage or doing damage.
Yeah, and they do still have the mitigation abilities. They just have it through active buffs and abilities that they use. They're going to be mindful of when they queue up those abilities and everything. On the tanking issue, Rhaegar in chat just mentioned that CSC is intentionally not calling these guys tanks. Because they're not supposed to be pure tanks. They're not supposed to be super, just nothing but tankiness. They're supposed to have DPS elements to them because it's an RVR game. Pure tanks don't really work very well for an RVR game.
No, they don't.
They get ignored.
Pretty much.
As much as possible, they get ignored.
They get CC'd and ignored.
And with the Fianna, though, you won't be able to do that as much because they're going to be buffing, as you said, they're going to be buffing everybody. They're going to be throwing out buffs for their whole group. They're all going to charge in. And he's still going to be in the front soaking up damage. So whenever you're trying to shoot everybody, he's going to be standing there in the front of it, intercepting the attacks. Meanwhile, he's casting buffs for all of his allies. He's casting active abilities on himself to soak that damage. It sounds like a tank to me, with additional damage. Surely they're not going to be as tough as tanks might be in some other games. But they're still the toughest thing we got.
Yeah, and they don't need to be, because being tough, if you're ignored, there's no point. So, and I like also the theme. I think right now the Fiannas are probably the heaviest Tuatha themed class. With all, especially with their Banes, since there are tree huggers, they have wood armors, and I think they're gonna have bonus to wearing wood armors rather than metal.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the counter effect with their sensitivity to fire, because that's something that's logical. But I like that it actually is a mechanic in the game.
Yeah, I really like that the Fianna is one of the first of the Tuatha classes that is not look like a skirmisher.
Yes.
Like a lot of the other ones look very like they don't want to commit too much to fighting
guerrilla.
So far.
Yeah, guerrilla
the
fighting.
Fianna straight up just looks like I do cool things, but I still want to really get in there. There's still a little bit because it's active. It's a passive region, so I imagine they'll still want to get in, take some damage, and then get out.
Yeah.
But the whole faction's doing that, so they kind of have to do it anyway. But their freaking death curse rains spears from the sky in an AoE.
Yeah.
I admit this has me slightly worried because I have noticed the TDD's penchant so far for lots of AoE attacks and abilities. Yes. This kind of bothers me since I'm going to be facing them.
But it's interesting also because it's a counterpart for the fact that they're skirmishers, so they're probably going to be a bit squishier than us Arthurians. So they have to have a counterpart to that. Having AoEs, they don't have AoEs traditionally. We don't know exactly how it worked there, but traditionally AoEs don't do as much damage as single targets. So they are going to disrupt, but there's still a way to go around them. So it's still to me it's still balanced. But I like also it's a pretty good death curse, and pretty impressive.
Yeah, the Anabolics mentioned that the shouts, from his or her understanding, will possibly only affect the Fianna. I don't know. It could be. I just took what I said from the ability itself, which says that it's based on the number. The effects are based on the number of group members nearby. So I took that assume that it's going to affect the other group members. It may not. I don't know.
Well, at least the regen, we know that the regen, they said during the Q&A that it's going to be only for the Fianna, for the character. But some of the other shouts look in the description like group-based buffs.
Warcry of Fion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I was specifically referring to, since that's one of their components. So that's going to be all kinds of abilities are going to be based around that ability. So.
Yeah, and well, the war cry for me is the more people you have around you, the more powerful you get.
Possibly.
Which is interesting also. From the way it's phrased, it's gonna be that. So if you're in the middle of your allies playing disruptions, you're gonna be more powerful rather than running in the middle of your enemies. So it still shouts support tank to me. Well, support fighter to me, more than actual damage soaking tank.
Yeah, I could have completely misread that, because I was actually reading it as in it's based on their power, so it's giving the buffs out to everyone else. It could be the other way around, that it's just based on the number of them and it's buffing the Fianna.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's still, I still like the way they're playing this one. It's still, again, I like the fact that it's non-mirrored classes and that each one has a twist. Even if the use of the class at the core is the same, the thinking behind the way it's played is a lot different.
One of the things I like about this one is it's so offensive.
Yes.
Which the other two TDD classes didn't seem like necessarily super offensive to me compared to the other ones in their same tier. They were a little bit more reserved, whereas this one doesn't really feel like it has any limitations to its damage per se. It's just you're tanky. You don't have as much active mitigations all the time because you've got the regen, but you can go out there, do some burst damage with the sudden strike, and use your war cry to buff yourself, do the death curse that rains spears from the sky and everything, and then you can get out of combat, hopefully, and let your regen do its thing.
Yeah.
Vikings, on the other hand, are running really par for the course with the Mjolnir.
They made Thor. They basically made Thor. You throw your hammer, you throw lightning. That's Thor to me.
You throw your hammer, you have a ranged attack, you can call it back to yourself. You can shoot lightning at people, you have some magic damage, which none of the other tanks really have. I assume that's going to come with a cost of lower damage mitigation. Though
yes,
they did say that
more offensive.
Yeah, they did say that as you do damage, your defenses will increase. So I imagine their starting mitigation will be lower, and then it'll, ramp up.
Increase.
Which was part of the Dranger when we did the cover of the Dranger document. That was one of the paths that they had that totally just talked about all of that.
Yeah, they're probably the ones that are more DPS oriented than the two others. Because I think they won't have much use of a shield, and that's what they talked about during the Q&A. They won't have much use of the shield, which is why they gave them the lightning. So those feel more like the actual heavy fighters.
Yeah, they're a little bit more of a DPS class for sure, and kind of on that point. I mean, they've got. Their death curse is a giant AoE knockback, and then they have ranged attacks. Do you think the Vikings are a little bit too focused on damage? So far, we've been seeing a lot of DPS in there, which they're supposed to have.
It's true. Yeah. They are. Well, if you look at our side of for the Arthurians, the classes are also more defensive, which is what they said about
Yeah.
each faction. The Arthurians, if you look at the Black Guard that we're going to talk about in a moment, they are purely defensive. They're what you can call a tank, a real tank. Even in the modern meaning of the word, they're going to be in full plate armor, extremely hard to hit to get past the armor and the shield. They're going to be the wall in front of their allies. The Vikings, and it fits also the feeling most of us get now from the Vikings of old, which is kind of the berserkers. They're rushing, not fearing death, rushing into combat. So to me, it's still in theme, and
I think
they
it's
are still
absolutely
heavy armor wearer. So they have still the defense of a heavy character, but with a more damage oriented philosophy.
Yeah, I agree that it's completely in theme. More my concern is that, like I said with the Fianna, one thing I like about the Fianna is that they're not quite so flighty looking as the other TDD have been so far. And so my concern is so far all the Vikings have been like damage, 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 and I'm just kind of looking at it going, is that going to continue? And if that continues, is that a balance problem where this faction is just outputting just crazy tons of damage? Obviously, it's way too early to really know about balance, but
yeah, but maybe they have, in compensation to that, a lot lower defense. So their strategy will have to be offense, pure offense, because if they get put on the defensive, they're at a disadvantage, which is probably what is going to be the exact opposite for the Arthurians, which their strong suit will be defense, and offense will be less strong than the others, and TDD being more balanced, but being average in both instead of very strong in one side or the other.
Well, speaking of damage and armor, how do you feel about the notion that attacks which do crushing damage do full damage through armor?
With the active dodge and the active blocking, I think it can work. It feels, as the description and from past MMOs that we have played, it feels overpowered because we are used to all damage being mitigated, because you didn't have an active defense. It was your innate defense that was mitigating the damage. With an active defense, if you block with your shield, for example, it's probably gonna negate most of the damage.
Probably.
Or if you dodge, but you probably won't be able to parry that kind of damage, and you won't be able. Soaking the damage will do nothing. So I think it can be balanced with the way the system is intended. How it's gonna be delivered, we don't know yet. But
I tend to agree.
On paper, it can be.
I tend to agree. I mean, my first thought on it was kind of like, oh man, I have to think about this. They're saying these melee people have a weapon that can completely pass through armor mitigation because it's so heavy and just bashing damage. As James said, is dodging active? Well, it really kind of is, because you can move out of the way. The actions are so telegraphed. You know, they're going to be rearing back to swing, and you just back away from them and you get out of the way. So that's technically active dodging.
Also, I think. I'm not sure because I was preparing to leave at the time during the cast, but I think also the crushing damage won't be as much.
It will be lower. Yeah.
Health damage and more incapacitating.
More disruption damage.
Exactly. So that also balances the fact that they go through armor. If piercing damage was ignoring armor, that would be way overpowered.
Yeah, the bashing is going to be more anti-tank, if people will forgive me saying tank. It's going to be more anti-tank.
Heavy armor.
It won't do that much against the non-armored people. It's gonna
Yeah.
do more disruption damage than anything else, while it will still do good physical damage. I did think that was an interesting thing that they mentioned during the cast, though, about the bashing damage, and that piercing weapons are still going to pass through armor pretty well, but if they fail to pass through the armor, then they're going to not do significantly less damage. And so there's going to be interesting physics built into the melee system to make it even cooler as you're trying to figure out all this stuff and how, is my piercing attack going to pierce his armor? Maybe not. I'm going up against the Blackguard. He's got super crazy armor. It'll be interesting to see exactly how that works. No, James, the active dodge will not be like press button to dodge. It will be walk backwards to dodge.
Or sideways.
Or sideways, depending. But no, there won't be like press button and dive out the side type dodging. They're not. I don't think they plan to do anything like that. Speaking of heavy armor on the Black Knight, we have, for the Arthurians, who would have guessed this? They're gonna have the standard iconic tank,
Knights.
Heavy armor, shield. It's a knight. It's the Black Knight.
Yeah, it is. It is pure medieval knight with the big shield. And they said that in the cast as a counterpart for having less options in magic and regen and things like that. They have a huge choice of weapons. They have access basically to all type of weapons, crushing, piercing, and slashing weapons. Plus, they have the most effective shield blocks from the heavy classes. So they're your typical knights in full heavy armor. They're gonna be the ones I really want to see that, and I'm expecting to see that. The shield walls, blocking doorways to prevent people. Even if you get the door to the keep down, you'll see a shield wall right behind it, preventing you from going there. So that's just, I think that's gonna be really cool. And even if you don't have magic, it's gonna be, I think, a class to watch out for.
They're all passive damage mitigation at that point. It's all armor, which is good and bad. I mean, it's really good against physical damage. They're going to be titans against physical damage, I imagine. Warriors and stuff are going to run in with axe, and they're going to laugh. Well, not axe body spray, but axes. And they're just going to laugh at them and be like, "Ha, you can't hurt me with your puny swords and axes." But, the mages start casting fireballs and everything at them, and they're going to be like, "Oh, this isn't so good." But, of course, they've got the shields they can block, so hopefully that'll help with that as well. They've got a shield charge, which makes me excited. I saw that in the list of abilities. Yes. They can just run out there, slam their shield into somebody's face, and knock them on their puny TDD butt. I'm not biased.
Just crush the lecher pens.
Yeah. They got what was their death curse? Fear Us causes panic amongst enemies and actually provides a buff to now I'm gonna double check this one if it provides a buff to other Black Knights or to himself.
It reduces
it reduces damage to other Black Knights. It specifically says other for this one. I just checked. So this actually kind of seems like it's going to reinforce that shield wall concept where the Black Knights could be standing there, one of them's getting low, he throws out his Fear Us, and all of a sudden they all gain reduced damage. Reduced damage receiving, mind you.
Yes, exactly.
They gain more mitigation.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. It emphasizes a group focus, because most of the other ones, they seem like they would mix well in just a mixed group.
And they are also the concept of the knight. If you look at their divine intervention, is they get a huge damage increase for their strikes if they're about to receive a fatal wound. So that's the last stand. That's the warrior. The symbol of the warrior. It's the knights. Is the one that stays behind everybody to let them retreat. It's as a French guy, having studied medieval times, it's the concept of the knight.
Yeah.
The real knight that we've seen in battles.
I do have a question, and not only about the Vikings, but also about the Arthurians. Several people have kind of voiced this a little bit. Do you think that the Arthurian classes are too standard and bland?
I don't think they're bland. They're more traditional. They're less fantasy and more medieval. So they feel bland because it's less fantasy. It's less embellished mythologies and things like that. But I think in the end, for most people, it's going to be the class effectiveness that's really going to be the deciding factor more than the coolness of the classes. And the way, I don't know, but I think a shield wall, when you're going to see a shield wall of Black Knights in front of you with spares ready to take on your attack, I don't think you'll think they're bland or normal or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, Fianna looks cool. It looks even cooler when put on fire.
Yeah, somebody else said, retorting to this, they're not bland. They're traditional. They're iconic, which is how I feel about it. They're based on the lore that most other MMOs are roughly based their classes on. The Knight, the Archer, everything. They're mostly based on the same concept that the Arthurians are based on. Their Arthurians are going to be familiar to a lot of people because they've played these sorts of classes in a lot of other games. That's true. But I do think they've got enough variation to them. I mean, the Abbot gets power from freaking booze. That's pretty cool. And he's a sort of hybrid kind of AoE healer that runs in and does DPS. That's not really very often in a lot of other MMOs either, so it's a little bit different. I think there are going to be a few classes like these that are typical classes, like the tank, where we're going to see them look a lot more traditional. Just because that's what every other game's based on. They're based on this knight concept. So the Arthurians are based on the knight concept. So it's going to be pretty similar. But when we get to the weirder classes, like the Spirit Summoner and everything, I think we're going to see some real variation, because that's not something that fits quite as easily into the peg of the Arthurians.
Yes. It's less classical archetypes. It's less something you can see in mythologies as well. So they have more creative liberties than with the knight. For example, we haven't talked much about it, but the archers, the Blackguard, as a French guy whose country fought English guys, it's the archetype of the English archer. They had huge bows with a huge range and very powerful ammos. Their arrows were armor piercing. They were feared by pretty much every country in Europe because of that. Yeah. So it's a classical concept, but it still is an effective one.
And I agree with Garade that I really, assuming I'm saying that right, I really think there's going to be a lot of people there, just like we've seen a lot of people that say they want to play humans.
Yes.
There are going to be a lot of people that go, I want to play that tank. That's like, I want to play like the normal tank. I don't want to play some crazy, weird, dual shield wielding dwarf. I want to play the guy who's a knight and has a sword, and he's a Knight of Arthur. That's what I want to play. And then they're going to go in there and go, hey, there's the Knight of Arthur. That's what I want to do. And they're going to play that. Yep. For you, how would you say, since we've done the Devout and this class on this cast, that's the word I want. How do you feel that the heavy fighters, or the stalwarts, stand up against the Devout in terms of coolness of the reveal and everything?
The Devouts are very specific to the game. It's not a concept we have seen in other games, so that there's that cool factor. I like the heavy fighters because it's a reinvention of the tank class. It's finding usefulness for tanks, for people who like to play full armored character, heavy damage mitigation, but still want to PvP and feel useful in that. So far, it hasn't been done. Most tanks are useless in PvP, as we said. So that's their cool factor. I like the Devouts just because of the Abbot and the beer, but that's just me.
Yeah, I agree.
I like also the Black Knights because it's to me it reminds me of when you're a kid and you want to have your armor. At least for me, the knights. When you see all those Arthurian movies, medieval movies, with those knights, to me that's their cool factor. It's your fantasy of having your huge shield, your armor, your sword, and going to battle fearlessly and being in the middle of the melee.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm actually, even though at first glance the tank reveal, the stalwart reveal, isn't quite as just visually striking and just go, oh, all this fancy stuff as like the devout were or the archers were. Yeah. Actually enjoyed going through the stuff for the heavy fighters more because, and this is why I've been voting primarily on the ones that I think are going to be the core classes for the game, because it tells me more about how the game's going to actually run than the devout do. The devout, okay, they're there, they're going to be healing, they're not an essential class though, but the tank is going to be out there. I can see how, okay, we know about the air system, we know he can step in front of things, take the shots. Now we know the tanks on the Viking side are also going to be more close range in, shooting lightning, but staying a little bit back. Whereas the Tuatha, they're probably going to be moving in and out with their groups, letting their region do their thing, but they're still kind of aggressive and getting in there. All the tanks are still kind of aggressive and can really get out there. The Arthurians are always more defensive, but they still have, that ability to do the shield charge and everything. So we start to get a picture of how the battlefield is really going to look.
Yes.
The Devout don't give me that, really. The Devout, I'm like, it's cool. And I can piece them in with the rest of them. But when I see the tanks, I can go, okay, the tank, this is one group that's going to be defining how the battlefield is moving, telling us exactly what's going to be happening. And I think that's really cool. They're really built into a lot of the key systems of the game. Air and the physics with the weight and everything all factor into these. The other thing, there was one last thing that they mentioned during the live stream yesterday that I wanted to bring up and get your impressions on, because I thought it was interesting. And that is, they kind of implied that the keep sieges themselves are not going to take hours. We've kind of gone back and forth on that. We even had a whole cast on the pacing of battle.
Yes.
How long are battles going to take? How long is it going to take to advance across the map? And they kind of implied that you're not going to be spending 3 hours taking a keep.
I hope it's just a misinterpretation, because I really want the siege. I don't want the standard 3 hours for a keep, but it must depend on how defensible it is, how defensive, how big it is. It's gonna take a few minutes to take maybe an armored farm, a fenced farm, or it's gonna take 5 hours to take a full castle defended by a whole guild. To me, it has to depend on what you're attacking.
Yeah.
If it's a keep, well defended, well built, with their own siege engines in the inside to defend themselves, it has to take hours.
I agree. I think the really big keeps, which I've said this before, I think are going to be further back. They're not going to be in the front lines of the PvP arena.
You won't
They're going to be
have
way
time
back
to build them.
Exactly.
The
really big keeps are going to take should take hours to take over if they're defended, assuming they're defended.
Yes.
However, I'm actually okay with this, because the way I interpret it, or the way I want to pretend it means in my head, is they didn't necessarily say it was going to be like an hour to destroy the keep. They said to take the keep. Yeah. So you don't have to destroy the keep to take it. I imagine it would take I'm hopeful that it would take a long time to completely destroy the keep.
To
deconstruct it, steal the materials and everything. But technically, to take it, all you got to do is kill the people inside of it. You can do that by blasting one hole in the wall and then you march in. Since hopefully,
I'm okay with.
Hopefully resurrection's going to be pretty limited, so once you kill everyone like 2 or 3 times, the keep's pretty much gone. They can't just keep respawning in there for hours. So I'm hopeful that
I'm okay
means
with that.
my preferences on respawn are going to be... Because I don't want to see people respawning in there for hours inside a keep. I don't want to see that.
No, destroying the keep must take a very long time, depending on how long it took to build it. It has to be a ratio. The more time you take to build it, the more time it takes to destroy it. But to take the keep, you just have to kill all the defenders, basically. So if the defenders are smart, it's going to take a longer time, or if they're powerful, or if there's a lot of people defending, it's going to take a longer time than if you have 5 or 10 people defending it. But taking a keep. I'm okay with taking a keep, not taking hours, but destroying it. It has to take a long time.
Yeah, because if it doesn't,
it gives also
crafter's gonna have a problem.
Yes, most definitely. As a crafter, I know I'll be pissed because if I take 3 days or 4 days to build a castle, make it perfect, defensible, impregnable, and you take it, and then it takes 10 minutes to destroy it, I'm gonna be really pissed.
No one will build anything at that point. I mean, that's what it would turn into. No one would build anything.
They're gonna build small outposts, but that's about it.
Yeah, and that's what I expect to see in the middle. In the interior, where the heaviest fighting is going to be small little bases. I actually posted on my Twitter something from Cube the other day that I made, which was practical in that fashion, because I've seen, we've all seen pictures of like huge keeps and everything that people built. I was in there like, I want to build, okay, here's what this is. I made a raised platform with a little wall around the front, and I went, you roll your siege engine on top, and you fire, and you have protection. It's small, it's efficient, might keep you from getting blown up. I expect to see lots of stuff like that in the front line, because there's not time to build anything else.
Yes, exactly. And as long as you have protection and enough people to be disruptive, it takes time to take it.
Yeah, and once you take a keep in the front line too, or anywhere, you probably really want to use it to defend it. I mean, you can strip it down, but if you have time between people trying to kill you, but tearing down the walls you're inside of while someone's trying to kill you is probably not a good idea.
No.
So, I guess looking at the heavy fighters, do you have any final thoughts? Your favorite thing about the fighters, and your least favorite thing?
My favorite thing is that they're actually fighters and not just tanks. So they have damage abilities on top of their damage mitigation. And the least favorite is, it's more of a worry than a least favorite thing, is really how the battlefield will evolve to make them useful and fun to play. So we don't lack players playing those classes.
Man. All right, chat. Somebody throw out one. What are y'all's favorite things and least favorite things about the fighter, the heavy fighter? I'm going to tell you mine. My favorite thing is that the Arthurian's called the Black Knight. No. Well, besides that, in addition to, I actually really like the Arthurian tank. I know I've said that about every Arthurian class so far, but I've traditionally played a lot of tanks. Even though in this game I'm really leaning towards the archer, I've played a tank in almost every MMO, and that's usually what I like. Is I like the heavy damage mitigation. I like walking out there, things hit me, and I laugh as they hit me because they barely hurt. That's what I like to do. So I can feel people that are going to like that class, because that's kind of me. I like to walk out there and feel invincible and just heavily armored with a huge shield and everything. Let's see. Chat is not really throwing out anything except they're talking about depths. There will be player control mobs in the depths, yes. They have mentioned NPC guards, and I have also had the impression that there will be some sort of NPC guards, maybe in keeps, maybe in trade routes. We don't really know.
Maybe, yeah.
There could be. And I actually think it could be cool if crafters could, like, if crafters could actually make, like, I don't know, like a guard dog hut, and then there's like a dog NPC that guards the gate or something, or like a guard tower and NPC guards spawn out of there. Not anything that's like super formidable, but at least would help if there's not that many people to guard the keep and some people come in and attack. Maybe they have like no respawn or something, I don't know. Good things. Gray, I mispronounced his name again. I forgot. I didn't see where he said above how to pronounce his name. I know he said it. Garoid. All right, Garoid. That's not what that looks like at all, but Garoid said that he loves that we are getting tanks at all because it's a PvP game. He wanted to be more defensive, which I can feel you with that. That's why I like the Black Knight, really defensive. I do feel, I mean, I know some people said that they're not calling these tanks. I do feel like they're still going to be tanks. I still feel like they're really going to be defensive. They just also have an offensive edge to them because you kind of have to in a PvP game. And Anabolics is concerned about the freedom of gearing. Said multiple times that anyone can use anything, so there's a potential for other characters to be heavily armored and function as tanky characters.
No, I don't think so.
Not
the
tankier.
Way those classes, tankier, yes, but at the cost of what? Your effectiveness. If you're an archer in heavy armor, first you're gonna be hurt, so your camouflage is useless. Second, you can't move as fast, so you're gonna be a sitting duck most of the time.
Sitting duck.
Which for this game is fitting. It's true.
Yeah.
But everybody can use everything. But they said again, it's choices. They give you the right to make the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Which is why also each class can be played by any race. I'm sorry, but if you make a Le Turpin Fianna, I'm gonna laugh at you, and I'm just gonna step on you.
I do agree, though. I don't think it's going to be broken. I think there are going to be viable options to play something else where, like, maybe you decide you want to play an archer that has heavy armor, and you're going to lose some firing rate or something out of that. But maybe there's a role you envision for yourself doing that you think that works out, and maybe it does work out, and I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a healing class that has some self-heals that wants to go super heavy tanky armor, and they manage to mix that well enough that they can tank. I personally have no problem with them tanking just because they're not the intended tank class. Then as long as it's not broken and unbalanced, I don't have a problem with that. More variety is good. It's just it is gonna leave people open to make the wrong choices and mix some things up that are gonna end up being stupid. And well, choice matters. So
exactly.
They did it to themselves at that point.
Yep.
Talking about populations now. So, since we don't have anything else about fighters, I want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us. In 2 weeks, we will have episode number 21 where we will talk about another class reveal. Maybe the archers or maybe something else, depending on what they reveal in the next 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Fortunately, they're doing these every week, so we're going to have a lot of classes to talk about.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.